Hey guys, it's been a while since I have posted anything here. Actually more than 2 years now. So many things have happened, but recently, after more than half a year living by myself, I finally came back home. One of the first things that came to my mind was to make this video, so I'm doing it while I still have it in me. Believe it or not, I was even planning on writing a book, but maybe that's for another time. Most of the stuff I say actually has been wrote down before. I'm reading this because there's so many things I wanted to cover. I wanted to share this with more people. I feel like it's kinda my responsibility and I wouldn't be able to keep it only to myself. All that I say isn't made up in any way. It's my interpretation, so you can take it with a grain of salt, but I promise myself to always seek the truth and act for myself, no matter how tough things can get at times. I'm just an ordinary guy from a normal family living in Poland. Most of my life I've spent in home watching movies and playing video games. When I was very young, of course, we used to play outside, climbing on trees, going to neighbors nearby and such, but I remember my sister got a small camera. That's when I started making some videos at that time, but sadly most of it is gone already. One time the camera apparently got broken and I couldn't save the data. I had a PS1 after my older cousin. Later on my parents bought me a PC. Now I actually remember it was after a year of keep asking my father. Looking back, I had so many fond memories, even such simple things like playing the first Silent Hill on PS1 at 14 years old with your cousin, and then being scared to come back at night, figuring out puzzles in Tomb Raider games and repeating it all over because we haven't had a memory card. Or even later on having an adventure first time in Oblivion. I still have this printed guide we used to look up sometimes. We would only use it if we didn't have a clue what to do. It wasn't like it's right now. We always have to go on the market, not having any idea what we are buying, but at least there was this element of surprise. Games were always around us while we were growing up. Before I go further, I just wanted to mention this guy, and his video was a huge inspiration for creating this. It's amazing with our current technology how I could contact him right away and he even replied the same day, which was pretty nice. This video was about to be done in 2 weeks, but I had to do it properly because I'll be coming back to it. Sometimes the longer you work on something, it doesn't necessarily turn out to be better. I've never known anything like this, so bear with me, but this will help me clear out my mind and hopefully will help some of you as well. For you to get some more context, first I have to put in some more details. As I said before, I could never concentrate and get anything done in the right way. I was always stressed out and that led to so many problems, which resulted in me skipping all my classes, and eventually there wasn't enough time for me to literally pass one exam. That was because of the Catholic holiday. This was in June 8 years ago. And this is very important to this story, so please stick with me. Back then I have played a lot of CSGO. Also got into DayZ when it first came out on Arma 2, so I played it a lot with my old group. I remember meeting them on some random TeamSpeak. Most of it has fallen apart already, but I could go on and on how much fun we had together. I still have a contact with one guy, Gregory. You saw him in some of my videos. Believe it or not, we just met each other in person for the first time in 2021 on New Year's Day. 10 years after we started playing DayZ. It's kinda incredible for me. During that time I started a YouTube channel. Couldn't think of a better name. I was always a perfectionist. I'm from Poland, the videos had to be done well, so Polish sounded right. There was this event called Survivor Games, basically a battle royale for streamers. I had a lot of time sitting home because of the situation I've kept myself into. I was browsing Reddit all day, Someone suggested to make a recap out of the event. Also remember watching this streamer called Smack. He mentioned it would be a good idea. So I always liked video editing, had a good ear for music, I think, so I thought maybe I should give it a try.
Armedi going down, actually. Size Syndicate taking out Armedi and Wagyu.
I posted the video, it was on top of the Reddit for a few days, people have loved it. Looking at it now, it wasn't executed perfectly, but I guess it was decent enough and done in the right time for it to receive the traffic. I ended up passing all of the exams. Nothing has changed really. I still didn't have a clue what to do. I guess similar like most of the people at that age. Back then I started watching this guy called Rekful. I never knew about him. He was one of the first IRL live streamers on Twitch.
Fuck, I'm making California seem so fun.
What he showed was still kinda unique even to this day. He spent several years playing WoW and then one day decided just to move out to travel the world.
Your face makes me happy. I'm just looking at it as a phone. It makes me smile, dude. Look. Your dad.
Met so many people and showed so many great countries. His enthusiasm and personality resonated with me so well I couldn't stop watching and following what he's going to do next.
I came here to Spain to compare to the competition. This is about 1/5 the price of your normal Oreo. I'm gonna see if it has 1/5 the flavor. Here we go. So this is Neo, the chosen Oreo.
The guy had a deep depression. From what I understood, it was mostly because of his brother's loss.
So I just want you to remember that when you feel depressed, like, it's not that those feelings aren't real. And there's a lot of science that suggests that it's not just a samskar, right? Because you have a family history of it. There's probably some genetic component to it. There's something going on in your neurotransmitters, which is absolutely real. And so you can have that biological stuff going on, and you can sort of have what I would call sort of like the roots of your depression are spiritual. They're not even psychological.
My father could have had the same problem, and I always try to remember this even though it was a long time ago and I wasn't even around back then. What Rekful taught me was whether you have money or not, you will still have ups and downs, but experiencing new things and meeting up new people is what's really all about. The guy was crazy at times, but no one would make me laugh so much back then as much as he did.
My viewer. Okay, one viewer. Ready?
One viewer. One viewer.
2. Wow, little.
Judge you not come.
Little.
Cool, huh? Thank you, man.
I was reading a lot of status reports and devlogs back when Dean Hall, creator of DayZ, was still around. That was my weekly routine since 2013. So a few years later, one day I read there was a job available at Bohemia as a video game capture tester, so I applied. What I can tell is that I was one of a few who got further. We had an assignment, I was testing out the game and I was supposed to give instructions where to go and what to do, and basically record a video based on the script. I sent it out to them. After a few days they replied that I did not do it exactly as they wanted, so they ended up declining my application. Again, I thought this was too good to be true. This was my best chance really moving out of country and starting doing something else, but sadly I had to forget about it. Around 2018 I was desperate to try out anything. Up to that point only experience I had was basically a monthly practice at the warehouse and also packing acrylic glass sheets, I believe it's called, used for billboards and such. All this dust and noise from the machines, everything was big and heavy, you could cut up yourself easily, and on top of that standing work without chairs and not a lot of space, so you couldn't move anywhere. I've tried it for a bit and that was enough. I had really no choice, so I was applying everywhere. Got accepted for some random job at the warehouse for a lighting company. I was about to start next week, but literally the day after the job interview, a phone wakes me up in the morning. I answer and someone says they would like to talk with me for a customer service position I actually have completely forgotten I applied for 3 weeks before. You could imagine I didn't know anything about dealing with customers, no experience. I spent the last several years sitting at home, and for about a year I was watching live streams on Twitch. But I went there anyway. They needed someone right away. Turns out I didn't have to do much and got in almost immediately after the interview. At first I was typing in production data and dealing with some basic customers. Just for you to get a perspective, I was scared to even say hello, and also was saying sorry to literally everyone for no reason. At first I was only for 3 months, then I learned some stuff and they let me stay for longer. This guy Marek especially, I have to mention, had the patience of a saint. I could always count on him, and whether it was some customer service call or the biggest orders from abroad we dealt with. If not for him, I probably wouldn't last there for so long as I did. A lot of things have happened. Many new people would have come and leave when I was around. 2 years in, we moved to a new place, which was a pretty interesting experience. I had an opportunity to see all of these production machines and big shelves to be moved out after several years being there. The company is a big producer of springs, so you could imagine the mess. For 3 weeks I was just sitting in this big empty hall by myself, but at the same time it was so calming, believe it or not. Most of the time we used to be all together, and sometimes you just couldn't focus when all of these people around were talking, so yeah, that was a nice change for a bit. Marek had a kid on his way, so he wasn't around for some time. I remember I could rely only on myself, and that's when I learned the most. After we moved to a new place, I had the opportunity to record a short video presentation of our new facility. One of our so-called managers came in one day and asked if I'd like to do something like this. She heard I was into editing and filming, so I thought I can give it a try. We are only supposed to record some scenes of work and a new hall there, but instead I tried to do something bigger on my own, and I did. I had this small rubber stand, but actually that was enough to do anything. Also, one of the guys even picked me up on forklift and we did some scenes from the top.
Z dołu, ej, słuchaj, zrób gdzieś tutaj ujęcie, z dołu do góry jest. Nogi mnie rozwala. Nogi mnie palą tego kucenia tutaj.
I spoke with the manager and she told me she might mention me in the email correspondence, but it wasn't for certain. I wanted to hear the opinion from the source itself, so I've sent the presentation both to her and our managing directors, which turned out to be a great decision after all. This put a smile on my face, but as you can imagine, things with me and many other people don't last for too long. My mother never had a chance to fly anywhere, and at that time was keep asking me about it, so I took her over for a trip to Corfu. My whole life I was abroad only once, in the Czech Republic. Thanks to Rekful streams really I was less hesitant to go. The whole trip went pretty great. We've seen the main city among different places. Also went to Porto Timoni beach, you can see it right here. To get back you have to climb up again. Somehow we managed to find a Polish couple who took us on board back where we came from. This was August 2019 during the week of the Assumption of Mary. I realized that when we were waiting on this bus stop and a group of the Australians came over, we were wondering why there's no buses coming. My mother still mentions this trip to this day. She was looking at the photos even recently. Almost 2 years have passed. The pandemic has already started. I remember one of the first days coming back of work and seeing the streets completely empty. This was a shock. Since the last Greece trip, I was again sitting at home, only leaving for work. Summer was coming and something got to me to visit it once again. Greece, I mean. Maybe this time with my cousin who I knew since I was a kid. I still got his video when he used to move out some wood to his house.
Ej, weź mnie. Nie rób tej miny normalnej. O Boże, co to?
Anyway, he was pretty hesitant at first because of his work, but somehow I managed to convince him. It didn't go that great. We had to postpone the flight because of corona restrictions. Literally a few days before the flight, they started requiring tests. After the call, the airline replied that it's not their fault because they can't control the policies in particular countries.
Nadałbym też kamerkę?
No to jest Huawei P30.
A, to powinien być bardzo dobry.
Bardzo dobry jest.
Komentujesz całą drogę?
Nie wiem, sobie poucinam później. Finally, a few months later, we flew over to Crete. This was in June last year. The best thing I remember was driving up to this olive oil estate. We were so lucky we parked up just to see, and right when he stopped, this tall guy with blue eyes went downstairs, looked at us and asked us if we would like to join the tour. Apparently you have to book it first, but we came right on time and had a nice little showing.
Chodzisz? Dobra, jedziemy, ej. Wjeżdżamy do tunelu. Jest grubo.
Jest grubo.
Ja pierdolę, ty.
Ale
Pierdolę, ty.
kurde. Katakumby.
Katakumby. Ty, jedziemy, ty. Dobrze jest. No, i tak trzeba poznać Grecję, mordo.
Jak malutki tunelik, ale...
A, myślałem, że większość to
Tak.
będziemy jechać i jechać, ale w sumie był taki efekt na początku, że słowo.
The whole trip wasn't planned at all, but in the end it turned out pretty well. I don't drink any alcohol, but one of the nights we tried some raki. We sat down in one of the restaurants and I remember he told me this story how when he was a kid they moved the cross out of the wall to the nearest chapel. Doesn't exactly know why, I guess they felt like they had to. I just found it interesting. Also remember we were talking about our dead grandfather a bit, how he was perceived and how my grandma on my father's side was dealing with stress soon after he died. Also a bit about my uncle who also died and my cousin's perspective on the whole situation. All the details maybe I will leave private. He was kinda surprised I didn't know much about him, but everyone was explaining it in 2 words or saying nothing at all. So I wasn't really interested, of course. Also, I wasn't even around back then. One thing we both thought at the time was that my sister planning to leave her home in October for work in Warsaw wasn't a necessarily clever thing to do. We don't live that far. My father works in a post office and drives there most of his life, so you would think what's the point paying additionally. Soon you will see why I have changed my mind. Some things simply don't make sense. At least that was in my case. You could see on photos I'm actually pretty skinny and always had trouble gaining on weight. When I was born, for some reason I didn't want to sit, my whole body was itchy and I couldn't sleep very well because of that. Everyone thought I was not eating enough, even though I would have eaten like 5 meals a day. More food would just make me even more tired and hungry, especially during winter. This overwhelming sense of cold, sluggishness, dizziness while standing up, blurry vision. On one of my birthdays I got into the train for a trip 200 kilometers away to Poznań, to one of the holistic clinics. They prescribed some stuff and made me realize there's a long way ahead. I couldn't afford driving up there every week or so had to look up in different places. In 2018 I started watching a lot of Joe Rogan's podcast. Basically, thanks to this video of Peterson's family, I decided to finally change my eating habits.
How did you go from these medications?
We were very science oriented, even though Mom kind of wanted to delve into diet and was like, we should go sugar free or stop eating, whatever, make sure you eat whole grains. My whole body was itchy all the time. That started when I was about 14.
She says a lot about how changing the food she ate improved all of her conditions. That got me thinking to dive deeper into it. Shortly after I found Dr. Sperry's videos. The guy is just amazing.
So I would go through the slideshow in the dark, sitting down, okay? So that way they couldn't see how nervous I was. But for those seminars, I would actually bring alcohol like champagne and cookies. That was way before keto. And that way they would actually laugh at my stupid jokes.
I will tell you the secret for subscribers is don't ask for people to subscribe and smash that like button. If the people are going to sign up, they're going to sign up. If they're not, they're not going to sign up. But I never sign up when people tell me.
I moved to my grandma downstairs and started experimenting and cooking for my own. The biggest results I've seen were after quitting sugar and doing intermittent fasting, but this didn't resolve everything. Believe it or not, I'm so sensitive I could detect something is wrong almost immediately, as long as I wasn't eating too much at once. I started cooking in the oven instead of frying, which made a huge difference as well. Throughout this time I have literally made a huge Excel sheet with all of the information I could find. Day after day I've started slowly incorporating what I learned. I also got into Dr. Zach's video, the closest to me finding health. Basically they are treating every organ with different foods, also according to the emotions you experience. The story of this man, Jordan Rubin, is just incredible, and how he's referencing the Bible, it still blows my mind, especially after what I experienced later on.
Got put on the phone with a man who told me, Jordan, I know how you can get well. I'd heard it dozens of times before, but I was not willing to turn down any advice at this point. He said, Jordan, if you follow a health plan that dates back to the Bible, is proven through history, and even confirmed by science, you can be well. He said, Jordan, I'm in San Diego and I want to help you. I was in Florida at the time. If you come out and stay with me in 3 months, you'll be working out on the beach in San Diego.
After 2 years of experiments, I noticed that anti-inflammatory diet for pancreas with moderate protein, sweet and bitter herbs and spices and a lot of green vegetables works for me the best. Also ashwagandha, cloves, turmeric, cinnamon. The last one especially I'm using on almost everything. I had the retina detachment at 20 years old. If I knew what sugar does to your arteries, probably wouldn't have so many problems. I've been in several clinics in Warsaw and around because of the pain I experienced. I could talk a lot about it as well, nothing helped. I almost got into a second laser surgery on my other eye. But something got to me to get out of the conventional diet, and thank God after many years I have realized what world we live in. This was at the beginning of COVID, a few months before my trip to Crete. I was sitting at home and only leaving for work. One of the days I was just randomly browsing YouTube. On the right hand side I saw a video entitled something like "This can be the best time in your life." Intriguing title, maybe a clickbait I thought, but I looked it up anyway. Some well-dressed guy speaking to a camera about pandemic, talking about how wise it would be to start a business right now.
Hej, tak, to może być dla Ciebie najlepszy okres w Twoim życiu. Możesz mi w tym momencie nie wierzyć.
Half of you, including me, would think at first that he doesn't know a thing, but at the same time, he was talking to a camera for 2 hours straight without stopping and any cuts. Also, something about him, his stories and determination was telling me that maybe it is worth at least trying out what he offers, especially when he said that things given for free people don't value. Life is about taking risks, making mistakes, learning from them and keep trying anyway. The guy is doing business online for several years. What he said at that time got me thinking that it is something I would like to try at least. I didn't have any better plans at the time. Another week at work doing the same full-time job, so I paid a small amount for access to his group and a monthly course he was sharing. He gave us an access to some of his products, shipping department, all the contact info among different things, which seemed fair for me. One of the evenings he was doing a private live stream. At that time he had about 3000 FFP3 masks, and he just told us to call up the hospitals and see if they are interested. There's been a couple of hundred people who got that information, but I've decided to try it anyway. That's when things started to take interesting turn. Please keep in mind that I don't understand many of these things either to this day, but hopefully everything will get more clear for you towards the end of the video. I mentioned before our quality manager at my previous job, the one who asked me to make that presentation you saw. This is the beginning of her business number that she had received at that time when she joined the company. At first we were also laughing about it, but I'm not saying it just like that, please remember it for later. One time before Christmas, which I didn't mention, she wanted me to create and send out the postcards to our clients. We wanted it to go well with the song Last Christmas, so I came back home, found out and edited some picture and also came up with the so-called lyrics the same night. So the next morning I showed it off to people in the office and everyone was really happy with it. I have completed a list of our clients, which we had quite a lot of, and had sent a simple email in 2 languages depending on country. So you probably ask, why am I telling you this? I did almost the exact same thing 1.5 years later while sending the offers with masks. Basically completed the list again with contact info from Google and created an email message to about 90 hospitals in Poland. I really came up with an idea just because I remember doing it some time ago at my job. If not for her asking me to do it back then, I doubt I would do it this way. Out of all 90 emails, only one guy contacted me, and straight away he was interested in a couple of thousand of these. The whole transaction, including delivery, maybe took us a few days at the most. Basically, I only found the customer and was forwarding the information. To create an invoice and pay all the taxes for the work I did, I had to start a business first. I did just that and received the payment almost immediately. I'm not hiding anything. It was around 14,000 zlotys without taxes. For the money I got, I bought my first camera on Amazon. Again, I don't know how that happened, but I guess they could not figure out the delivery address in Poland. I reported it, they sent another camera, and 3 weeks later turns out the previous one happened to be delivered as well. If I remember correctly, I contacted the seller about it, but they wouldn't reply. The box stayed in my house and I was wondering what to do with it. Eventually I gave it away to a guy living 300 kilometers away from me, near the Czech Republic, but more about that probably in the next video, because that story deserves its own segment, really. A year has already passed. I was keep trying to start selling online by myself. Nothing really was coming out of it, a few sales a month at best. On top of that I bought some electrical fans for the summer from the guy that turned out to be not so trusted. You have to pay a lot of taxes in our country. I was losing money every month, but still believed that I could make at least one bigger transaction, just like with the masks. This time we had some polished dispensers, believe it or not, from nickel steel. I made this huge Excel sheet, was calling up hospitals every day, but no one was interested this time around. Same man I helped sell masks for was doing a conference in Warsaw. Again, I thought maybe it's worth coming there. The older I get, the more I realize it's usually better to do anything instead of analyzing whether it's good or bad. As I said, we don't live that far from Warsaw, so I rode to the train station on my dad's old bike. We sat in a big conference room with all of the people, and towards the end, as everyone was trying to take photos with him, I just came up, introduced myself and said thanks. He asked me how is my business coming along after selling the masks. I said I haven't done much, but I still appreciate what that taught me. I also said I was getting tired of my job, there was too much stuff on my mind, and I was looking to try something else. He picked up his notepad and said to write down my number. I did and exited in disbelief. Finally, a couple of weeks later, he sent me an email first offering to help me with my business, but then suggested that I can start doing some customer service and create some listings for him. This was the moment I realized it. From the outside it seems like a coincidence, but the last 7 years of my life led me here. I was always saying I couldn't believe I got that first job, but everything I taught myself and got myself into customer service when I learned to write emails and talk with clients, photo and video editing I've done and learned on YouTube, the opportunity to record that video presentation of our facility, also my health issues I tried to deal with, the trip to Greece when I talked with my cousin, also finding out that video that led me to sell masks when I wasn't even interested in eCommerce. If not for failing that one exam because of Corpus Christi holiday, I wouldn't even create this YouTube channel, because my life was a mess before and also for a long during that time. Everything was making me irritated, no way to relieve stress, and poor eating habits, always sitting at home so no sunlight. All this really affects your mood, especially if you haven't been taught how to manage that as a kid. I wasn't appreciative of my family and their problems as well. I just didn't want to get involved in anything, even if it was important. I wasn't getting along very well with my sister. I was always the type of person who didn't want to rely on anyone, and it stayed with me to this day. Which sometimes can be better, but when you need help, this can destroy you. I also never offered any help. Didn't want to talk. This one time, I have to mention, my grandma was cleaning up her kitchen. I could have done that for her. I just looked at her and instead went into my room. That's when she broke her leg. She already had some problems with her bones, but still I couldn't believe it was just a matter of 5 minutes and I could have prevented. Around that time I realized I should go to a confession. I haven't been going to the church since I was a teenager. I was keep delaying the visit, but eventually I woke up earlier in the morning, went there, got on my knees and basically told everything that I had on my mind. I literally cried, also had this desire to tell about the whole story, so I got in contact with this priest, Roger, his name is. I didn't know at the time, but back then he's been around here only for a couple of months. Previously he was working in Warsaw for 9 years. Recently he said that he had an opportunity to meet a lot of great people here. Also said that there's less priests and we should pray for this. A year ago we had our first talk. He listened to me and said I can call him whenever. I finished my previous job with a 1 month notice, started a new one in September, basically creating listings for products and help servicing the customers for the guy I helped sell masks for. Literally everything led me here. The account was freshly started a couple of months back. I didn't have any expectation, just wanted to see how good I am at this and if I can manage. I created a few offers and at the beginning of October 2021 we already had quite a lot of sales. This was a very long time since I've done a job that would actually satisfy me, other than YouTube. We are about to go on Amazon with the shipping as well. There's a lot to tell about this, but this is not important. What's more important is the things that started to happen and what that taught me. What I am about to say isn't made up, and I wouldn't want to go by myself to the other side of the country this year if not for what happened. What I said so far is barely half of it. One thing I know, no matter what I say, some things you gotta experience. I was very fortunate, I still can't believe myself, that's why I'm sharing this with others to keep remember and strengthen my faith really. It's hard to explain, but every single inquiry or negative opinion, without exceptions, was a lesson. I've done probably 100 or so phone calls and I don't remember a single one bad experience as long as I was being genuine. For almost a year I replied probably to a couple of hundred messages as well. Always at least try to speak up the truth and be honest, even with the tiniest of details. Do not hold your emotions in you. If I did that, I would give up completely or the clients would have created a bigger problem. My birthday is on the 10th of October. It was when things really started. I know how this will sound, but bear with me. I don't really have an Instagram or Facebook, but since that day I have started doing videos and photos almost all the time. Everything that could was keep getting me away from the job. I know how it sounds, but I lived in this home for over 25 years and nothing like this ever happened. We have this small house where my grandma used to live in. I don't know how they managed that, but from what she says there were like a few people at the time living in there. That was after the Second War, before my grandfather built the home. I never cared, but I started asking her who paid for our home and how it all got started. There was always so many discussions about money in our family. Eventually after a few days she admitted that was both her and him. After my uncle died, apparently she couldn't deal with his death. On top of that, my grandfather was keeps drinking. I hope I'm saying this correct, but apparently they separated and he lived in the small house again for a while, soon before he died for laryngitis in 1990. Don't ask me why, but I've decided each week to get in there and call up the customers, asking about their opinion. If you walk in a lot, it elevates the stress. From my experience, it's easier to speak with clients that way. So I keep coming there. There's something about going to a different place that makes you more disciplined and ready to go as well. I don't know why, but this felt right. Sadly, even though I have told my father I just need basically an hour or two each week, he would invite people to drink in that house anyway. I'm the type of person that does things no matter what. It wasn't different this time. I couldn't keep up with my emotions. One time I just entered and I didn't have to say anything, they all left. My father is a good man, he always worked hard and thanks to him I had a roof over my head, but I can't stand him under the influence. A lot of the times he sits down in silence. He's a type that does not share that much and keeps everything in him. I knew already he went through a lot, but at the same time I can't change the past. Both of my parents never had a perfect relationship, but not to the point I saw it then. Our home isn't too big, so we can hear quite a lot. Every few days I would hear shouting on the second floor. I go upstairs and then it turns out it's something dumb. After a few minutes of talking, it's suddenly all over. There was some tougher situations, but this was just the beginning. Of course, I could not just sat there, work normally, pretend like it's okay. We are getting ready with selling for a holiday season and I promised myself to do the best I can, as this was my only chance. At the same time, I had to remember about family, but I couldn't deal with my parents' problems all the time. I had to go upstairs and ask what happened. There was always something. It was happening all over. Day by day, all of a sudden more problems with customers started appearing. Returns for the products. I got the message from the office that manuals haven't been done properly, and I had some calls regarding that as well. Everyone wanted something, but the weirdest thing that would mess with me so much was when I started seeing the numbers. Every day, mostly phone numbers, but what's more surprising, also in emails, even on plates outside. The job was pretty flexible, which I valued, but I would go out for 15 minutes to take a walk, and I would see this daily somewhere. Lots of stuff was happening around that time. This was when I realized that one of our manager's phone numbers was also the same, and I wasn't getting along with her very well. That's why I asked you to remember it previously. The employees over at this new job all of a sudden were not so keen on me either, especially because I was new to this and they were doing the job for about 15 years. Everything was taking my attention away. Customers, family, phone calls, things around tried to make me get into an argument or put me in a bad spot so I could lose the job. I'm not trying to take blame on anyone because I could have made some mistakes as well, but it was like this test I was keep having. I couldn't sleep very well. I was on the verge of quitting like 4 or 5 times. Just as a reminder, I worked for over 3 years in customer service and don't remember having things out of the ordinary happen to me, like ever. I will just give you a few examples. One night, my father was knocking on my door when I was in the bathroom, saying there's something in his bedroom. He took off his glasses and said that some stuff got into his eyes and he can't see anything. He went into the other room and closed up the door behind. I'm getting into his bedroom to see, look around, there's nothing inside. Again, this is the middle of the night, I'm only with my grandma and him. Every now and then I order this one water higher in magnesium because of my health issues. This one time the whole package was covered in some oil and they had to return it. There was also no tracking ID. The package had to be checked up at the DHL warehouse. Finally they wrapped it up in a black stretch and sent it out to me a few days later. This only happened to me this one time and I used to make orders a lot. Grandma sometimes would have asked me weird questions. I remember once she wanted me to bring her a red ball to clean up herself. She was so convinced there is one in her bathroom, but we only have a blue one. She doesn't buy anything new. She grew up in poverty. We even have this fly flop she tried to fix herself recently. Family members and other people around taking my attention away even though I was closed up in my room. I admit I was getting paranoid and they wanted good for me, but my cousin came in once to take me out on a movie, Dune. I'll be honest, I barely could get past through it. Went out of cinema even more confused. A few different times I would get a message on phone that a package was somewhere on its way when I haven't ordered anything. 1 or 2 nights I stayed up longer because I couldn't sleep and heard some creaking noises, but this could be anything really. My father this one time couldn't find the bills for recycling the waste. He just came back from work. He works as a postman for over 30 years, so he knows his stuff. We are both looking for a while. Eventually I went downstairs. He shouts he finally found it. I look it up and this was, I believe, the electricity bill. I thought he was joking, gave it back to him to see, and I was actually right. Eventually I called up the town hall and they told me the price and where to look for the transfer info on their site, so I did it. It could be the same week or around that time. I have told him I need to focus on the job until the end of the year, when I still have a chance. I just wanted them to be calm and stop arguing. Again, no one will believe me. He said I'm making a big deal out of it. Should get a real job and made a joke that they should cut off the power because I'm too invested. It happened the next day. Couldn't work for half a day. I went to our aunt to see if they have power, but It was only on our side, of course. I only remember my father's face after he came back from work, when I reminded him. For some reason around that time my mother happened to need a notebook, even though she never wanted it before. I looked up a few, found something, and just as I was about to buy it, I checked up my bank account and couldn't find an option to exchange the currency I had saved up. There simply wasn't any. I called up the bank service and had to do it via voice call. Eventually we sat down and did it together on her account. The notebook arrived pretty fast, about 2 days later, but then I couldn't install the system. It wasn't detecting Windows from my pen drive, and I tried a few. Nothing out of ordinary, but again I was dealing with it for another half a day. Eventually I called up my cousin, who did it a couple of days later. Meanwhile, I have told him what I'm doing and I would appreciate his help, but he quote-unquote advised me that this job doesn't sound great and he isn't really interested. I called up the priest Roger I got in contact with, saying that I have to explain what's going on, and then he literally tells me he's locked up in Italy because of the virus and can't come back, and that this is a strange coincidence. I started crying. I was about to talk with him before his trip. Eventually he only found time on phone, but this wasn't enough. Most of this I'm speaking off my mind, so not everything might be chronological, but the facts remain. He tells me to go to a church on Sunday. This was, I believe, still October. I was never going too often to the church, but I went there this time and it turns out there's a missionary day. I don't know how to explain it, but I felt like I was given an advice, and week by week many things started happening according to what's been said. I've told my employee I can't work at home anymore for some reason. He suggested to move out starting November and he's even going to pay, but I felt like it's still not the right time, so I declined. I'll be honest, as I said, I never cared that much about my family. More often we just sit in my room in front of the PC, doing my own thing. But last year there was this deep desire in me to start asking my grandma about her early life. Also what happened with my uncle and how he was. It's all about having a perspective. Nearly all of the people in my hometown are either dead or sick, mostly due to alcohol. A lot of tragic incidents have happened. She finally wrote me a letter after asking her about it for a few days. Me and my father went to a cemetery. Right at that time they were rebuilding the road, which was even surprising to my father, but this wasn't a reason to go back home, so we went around. We arrived and fixed my grandfather's name on a tombstone. Some random man walked by saying that's a good thing we did that. Since they arrived, we lighted up candles. At that point I was writing down notes and making photos of everything. I looked them up later on and then realized. It turns out my uncle on my father's side died exactly 30 years ago. I've never had a chance to meet him. Apparently he liked reading books and wasn't into fights. Was pretty calm and reserved as well. Also was drinking a little, but did not do it as much as other people around. I finally talked with my grandma and parents once again about what happened all these years ago, but didn't want to go back to it anymore. I knew enough, don't want to share everything, but it involved alcohol. Now looking back, only my grandma wasn't drinking. She had to deal with all this, and I'm still surprised how she managed to raise the whole family. She never had much time for herself. Thank God at least I'm not a drinker. I'm not smoking or taking any drugs as well, so at least I can say it with a clear conscience. These were definitely not hallucinations. I promised myself to stop answering anyone and finally do my own thing, because I wasn't really satisfied with how much I did, which I also have said many of times to my employer. One day someone started knocking on front door. I was hesitant again, but it could be something important, so I opened the door. A man looks at me surprised and says he's an organist from our church and he's giving away Christmas wafer for families around here. He says he's been here over the years and doesn't recognize me. I told him I would always sit closed up in my room, and I got my son the wheelchair now, so she can't always come. He asked me straight away if I know what he has in his hands. I told him that it is to share with family and closest ones on Christmas Eve. He told me that he's been around our town and a few people didn't even know what he's giving away. I was really surprised hearing that. He also mentioned his daughters and how no one has any time for each other anymore. I have told him that everyone is mostly addicted to their phones, but it's still pretty weird that some people might not know what it is. I also have said that recently I started coming to church more often. There's also been so much work I couldn't keep up with it. He said he actually noticed me recently with one of the priests I was talking with. He also has told me two important things I remember to this day. First was something along the lines that you have to decide for yourself if you want to serve Jesus or not. And if you have 4 problems, 2 of them you will deal with, the rest he can solve. You just gotta trust. Also the second thing, that everyone and everything will stay on your way. And many of these are your own experiences that will be hard to explain. My eyes started watering out again, especially after the last couple of weeks. It was like someone giving me an answer. He also said he has a lot of health issues and it's not that easy moving and giving this out from home to home. I wanted to talk with him longer, but he had to visit other families. Said he's busy until Christmas, but I can always meet him in the church at the top, where he's playing and singing. I immediately went back to my grandmother, gave her the wafer, and she only asked if I had paid them. I was surprised if I should, I didn't even know that. I think that proves the point. It was the first time I invited him, really. I thought that after the Saints' Day things would have begun to normalize and I would be able to do my thing, but this wasn't the end. A few days later I was trying to make sure that one of the orders was sent out correctly according to the offer, so I called up the office because we are supposed to add an extra. They contacted deliveries. One of the employees over there took it the wrong way, thought I'm getting in her way, and basically told me that this job isn't for me, that I should quit and find something else. Then she hung up. We are on good terms before. I spoke with her maybe twice, and she told me before that she has some problems with her children. They also dealt with the virus. Her grandfather had died recently and she had to bury him, which got me thinking to start visiting my grandfather on my mother's side while he's still okay. I thought she probably dealt through a lot, so I would just leave her to calm down, but trust me, this wasn't easy. Still, I've seen enough already, so this wasn't a big deal. My employer, after hearing her opinion about me, was a bit frustrated, so another problem arrived. He explained to me again what I'm here for. I always had to speak out the truth, no matter what. I've sent him a message that she might have a lot on her head. I noticed some customers haven't been satisfied with shipments as well. I mentioned that he should look into it and maybe we need help. Literally, the next week we got a negative review for a book not being delivered on time. He said he's going to deal with that and I should stop worrying about it. I'm saying it a lot, I know, but believe it or not, again, around that time on Sunday I heard something along the lines that we as Christians are all prophets. I really had this feeling that something is wrong with the deliveries, and a week after we received a bad comment about it, it was like meant to happen, really. As I mentioned, I started going to my living grandfather more often, and he has told me this story about how when he was a janitor for several years, every now and then his boss would have show up to take photos of his work and present it to others as a proof and appreciation. I could go on, but I talked with a few members of my family several times, and you could always take something out of the conversation. You just had to focus on details in their stories, what happened, and not necessarily what they are thinking about it. Believe it or not, it helped me a couple of times. So after I left my grandfather, I realized I should do print screens of my work, explaining everything immediately in all details, so my employer can have a proof. Many of times I would just write something down, but that wasn't always enough. It was Sunday. After I noticed that many of things were happening according to Sunday's Mass, I would start watching the Gospels online as well, just out of curiosity. I kinda laughed this time around and didn't take it seriously. It was in a Polish version, but I will put the English one.
Now, there's going to be a period of unparalleled distress. There will be cosmic upheavals. The sun and moon will be darkened, as it says. Stars will fall from the sky. And he says that the heavenly powers will be shaken when Jesus returns to judge the earth.
There's been some weird stuff, and I still only mentioned maybe half of it really. At this point I thought nothing would have surprised me anyway. The situation seemed like it's under control, but I wasn't exactly right. I don't remember all the details that week, even though I wrote some of it down, but one of the first days my employer informed me that his son was born and he cannot talk at the moment. I've said congrats, honestly. I would have probably have my cell phone turned off completely if I was him. But he informed me and we are on good terms, so the same day I went into the kitchen to make a tea, and my grandma says that the bucket almost got on fire, but she managed to put it out. I quickly grabbed the camera and recorded the video.
Nie rzucać niedopalonych papierów do śmieci.
Ale jeszcze raz co się stało? Jeszcze raz, pamiętasz. Powiedz co się stało po kolei.
Zaczęło się, podpalałam gaz i rzuciłam kawałek papieru. Nie zauważyłam, że on się tam jeszcze tnie. I jak rzuciłam do śmieci, zaczął się palić. No.
I zapalniczki nie ma, tak?
I nie ma zapalniczki. No.
No jestem ciekawy teraz.
I teraz bym poszła do pokoju, jak nieraz pójdę się położę. Chyba ten dym. To by się zapaliło, no bo tu jest przecież zaraz ta szafka. Poszłoby do błazegi.
Zielona, pamiętam, że ją zostawiałem. Zostawiałem ją z rana.
A tam
Pamiętam.
wysoko nie położyłeś?
Nie właśnie. Nie ma. Zostawiałem go z rana, nic mi się nie przewidziało. Najlepsze. Bo ja nawet dzisiaj nic nie robiłem do jedzenia.
Ja podpalałam ją.
Podpaliłaś, no właśnie. Gdzieś ją, ale mówisz, że ten popiół był, tak?
No popiół był, jak później nie miałam zapalniczki i podpalałam papierem od tego dużego gazu. Musi gdzieś być, przecież cudów nie ma.
The stove is kinda broken. I bought a lighter for her, but for some reason we could not find it even a few days later. Almost the whole week the weather was also either cloudy or there was a storm. One day I went into my sister's room to print out some stuff because she had a printer over there. And again, I don't know how I found these paintings. As I said, she moved for work in Warsaw 2 months back. I'll just show you only a small portion of this. She has some amazing art skills, but maybe she doesn't want me to show it. At that point I was about to call up the priest to bless the house because I didn't know what's about to happen. But they were also busy and they usually go at the end of the year, so I thought this could wait a little. I still cannot believe myself, but this really happened. Complete madness. Some days I was just laughing what I will discover, but this one week I was literally scared. On the 15th of November I even went for rosary. This was one day before the day of Lady of the Gate of Dawn, which at that time I didn't know about. It was a cold night and I'm not ashamed. I stayed in the church longer and prayed for my family with tears in my eyes. The same week my employer called me up asking about the work. He wrote me some stuff he'd like to have done, but because of all of these situations I just couldn't think straight, even though I locked myself for a few hours. I simply couldn't done enough. Many of things were keep happening. One of the last days, and yeah, I always say that, I panicked and thought the gas was leaking. So I ran around the house opening all the windows. It doesn't make any sense even to me when I describe it, so I will leave it at that. I was trying to keep my attention away from YouTube, but around that time it recommended me this amazing scene from the TV show Lost I used to watch.
We need to push the button. No, we don't.
Did you not hear me, brother? I crashed your bloody plane. How did you manage to do that? On that day, those numbers turned to hieroglyphics. And when the last one came down, this whole place started to shake. And that screen filled up with system failure. System failure. And that number there, 9/22/04, September the 22nd, 2004. The day your plane crashed, it's real. It's all bloody real. Now push the damn button. I know what I saw. It's a lie. It's not real. None of it is real. You don't want to push the button? Then I will. No. You killed us. You killed us all? No. I just saved us all.
For a long after that, I knew I had to share this with someone. It's an archive, another weird coincidence. The channel was deleted recently. I recorded this a few months later, in March, that's when I noticed. There was this comment down below the video talking about Locke destroying the computer for a greater cause, and how sometimes you have to do the tough choice for greater things to happen. Sadly, you can't find this comment anymore, same with the video, so that's all I have left as a proof. My employer finally said that he's not happy with my performance, and he informed me we will have to end it. Again, the same weekend I was prepared for just about everything. I know how it sounds, but I was keep having that scene in my head. It got me like, Wojtek, you knew what you saw, and maybe this is for something greater. Don't make a fool of yourself or be naive, and just tell him it was nice to work and we should keep in contact. So I did exactly that. At that time I was about to go to work anywhere, even at McDonald's, just to forget about this last few weeks. So this was it. Sunday came around. I was kinda relieved, but at the same time disappointed in myself. Something got to me just to send him a last message. We are keeping in contact on WhatsApp. There was this time when I would call him at night even, and he would have answered and listened to me. The guy has lots of patience, that's for sure. I've sent him a message that I suspect he has a lot on his mind. The guy just had a baby and I could understand his nerves. He replied and told me to send him reports every morning, and then we can resume for a while, see how it goes. I think it was on Wednesday. I was about to send what I've done. Literally a few minutes later, just as I did, the power went down again. Exactly at 8 AM. I already knew I had to always share everything and speak up the truth. Every normal person would have think I'm making this up, so I recorded the video from my kitchen.
Cześć Jacku, nagrywam to, żebyś mi uwierzył, że nie zmyślam. Jest godzina za 10:09 w tym momencie. No i nie ma światła, tak? Od razu jak do mnie zadzwoniłeś. Żeby nie było, tutaj jest widok na moją ulicę. Pogoda też nie jest jakaś tragiczna, trochę dopiero zaczęło padać. Ale no jak widzisz, no nie mam prądu, także nie mogę w tej chwili pracować. Pozdrawiam.
I quickly have sent it to him. At the exact same time, 4 dispensers have been sold. We've had problems selling this for quite some times. I mentioned I was calling up hospitals even. And now I didn't even have power in my home. For some reason I also forgot to check out the Amazon account we had started. One of the books apparently haven't been delivered. At that time I couldn't do a thing. Eventually he informed me that he will do it, so again I made a fool of myself. This wasn't the end. The same day, exactly on the 12 PM, the power went back on. But also only this day out of the whole week my mother had to go on a morning shift, so I was again alone with my grandma. I heard the alarm from the kitchen downstairs. I'm coming in, asking what's going on, and my grandma says to turn off the clock. I noticed right away that it was coming from the fridge. I've picked up the clock, showing it to her directly, telling it's not it, and she still says it's the clock. Then a few seconds of silence, she looks at me and changes her mind. I thought she was making fun of me. I picked up the phone to record it and asked again.
23 dzisiaj jest, tak? Dobra. Dzisiaj jest 23 listopada 2020.
Lodówka pisze.
Tak, Lodówka, ale przedstawmy sytuację, jak wyglądała jasno. Babcia się śmieje. Babcia się śmieje, ale ja powiem, jak wyglądała. Godzina 8 wysiadł prąd, od tego zacznijmy. Tak?
No.
Tak, babcia.
Aha, tak,
Kojarzysz.
tak, Wojtek.
No, ale sobie nie zmyśliłem. Śmiejesz się? Czemu się śmiejesz?
Bo mi na śmiech naleciał.
Ale pytam ciebie, o 8 wyłączyli prąd, tak?
O 8, no.
Wyłączyli o 8 prąd.
No.
Wszedłem do kuchni
No.
i mi
Zaczęła
mówisz...
piszczyć lodówka.
Nie, i powiedziałaś, że zegarek piszczy,
Że
tak?
zegarek. no.
Tak? Tak. A zegarek stał tutaj, dosłownie tutaj. I kiedy on piszczy w taki sposób? Nigdy nie piszczy.
On nigdy nie piszczał w ogóle, od tego się
No właśnie, od tego zacznijmy,
Od
tak?
tego się
I myślałaś, że piszczy zegarek, tak?
No
A
tak.
piszczała lodówka, a lodówka jest z boku i słychać ją, ewidentnie słychać ją, że jest z drugiej strony, tak? Jakby piszczało z lewej strony, to byłoby ewidentnie słychać. A pokazałem ci zegarek, ja bym ci pokazałem ci wprost. Teraz to już tego nie udowodnię, ale pokazałem ci wprost ten zegarek i ty mi patrzyłaś się w oczy i mówiłaś, że piszczy dalej zegarek. Doskonale to
No
słyszałem.
tak, bo
Tak
tak mi
powiedziałaś.
się
No,
wydawało.
no tak ci się
to
wydawało.
mi się wydawało.
No, ale tak było. Tak było.
Tak było.
No to tyle możemy ustalić. Tak było. I lodówka dalej piszczy. No i co? No i nie wiem, odłączę chyba te gniazdko, jeszcze raz podłączę, tak? Tak jak...
A i jak wyłączyłeś też piszczy?
Na razie nie wyłączałem, tak? Ale
Ja
chyba
też
wyłączę.
później nie włączysz.
Nie wiem, mogę tak zrobić. Ale jak się wszystko rozłoży.
Wojtek, zostaw, na razie może się włączy.
Dobra, nie wiem, zobaczę.
I was calling up all the services around. Eventually I have read up in the manual something along the lines that it shouldn't be turned on for long, especially close to the wall. We are arguing if I should cut off the power or let it stay and see if it fixes itself. It was keep beeping and I am not hiding it. I was getting paranoid about everything. Finally clicked on a LED panel, it stopped beeping. I was relieved, lesson learned. I spent 2 hours on the fridge I could ignore, asking myself for the 100th time again how it happened. Without that context it sounds ridiculous, even my grandma was laughing, but experiencing it moment after moment wasn't fun. So the power went off 3 times in the last month. I still couldn't explain it without sounding crazy, especially to my father. I finally decided it's now or never. This was too much for me. My decision happened literally within 2 days. I decided to move out without any preparation really. I'm looking at the listing somewhere not so far so I could always check up on family, but far enough so I could get away and have a break. I never liked Warsaw and prices are usually too high there, but there was a decent one-room apartment in a city nearby. First call, a woman tells me I can see this place the next day. My father let me take his bike. It was pretty dark, but I arrived there quickly. The owner exactly at that time had the COVID. He sent out someone else. The flat looked alright. I've said I will take it, but I have to move immediately because I have work, so we did it right away. This is another one of those things. I didn't know if I should bring my PC, so for the time being I borrowed the notebook I bought for my mother. Another weird coincidence, we had it now. Turns out it saved me a lot of time and this will be my best help over the next several months. I installed some stuff, haven't received much help in moving. My father wasn't taking it lightly either. I didn't really ask for it, but one of my cousins helped me arrive there and bring the heaviest stuff, but most of it I have picked up with me and brought within a few days. This is what was inside. For me, again, it wasn't a coincidence. Even the honey panties, which led me to try some of those later for my health issues. Later on I also asked the owner how was it with me. He said I was one of the first people to call. The next day they've had at least a dozen or so of phone calls, but they chose me because they thought I seemed calm and composed. The apartment was also on Wyszyński Street. He was announced a primate here in Poland. Again, no one is going to believe me, but some people literally would always be in the entrance opening the doors for me. Each time I would go out, I would see the same older man with his dog. I had a neighbor that was resembling my grandmother and many more things that I don't remember now. Day after day I was realizing new stuff, whether it was about the job or my family and who should I get in contact with, so I'd usually write this down when I was waking up. I can't tell much about products, but we've had a polisher for cars, polished dispensers, paint that you could use to write on any wall after polishing the wall first, also beauty equipment for polished skin. Everyone was saying you gotta get used to a new place, but first day already I sat down and I was so happy, didn't have any problems. I know how to cook a bit and stuff, so that wasn't a problem as well. The flat was perfect, especially lots of windows for the light to pass through. Back then I have also realized I don't really need a PC. Every payments and work I did using the notebook.
Nie pstrykały przez parę godzin, ale o 23 zaczęły. Nic mnie już nie dziwi.
Okay, this wasn't a big deal, but there was some other weird stuff that was still going on. One of it was me trying to sign up the arrangement. One of the days the wife of the owner came in because, as I said, he had a COVID. We were looking for a pen, there wasn't any in the flat, so he went outside, she opened her car, started looking, picked out one, wasn't writing, picked out another one, wasn't writing as well. So she picked out the third one and the fourth one, and they were not writing as well. Somehow I managed to sign it up, but the signature looked horrible. She told me I could do it later, but I didn't want to wait anymore. I was calling up my father and checking out on my family every now and then to see if they are all okay. I learned so much over these last few months, but some of their reactions were pretty weird, even though they wanted the best for me. I probably should have started with this, the most important part of the video, but if not for what I have told you before, this wouldn't make an impact. It was the beginning of December already. I had this relief that I've managed to do it all quickly and it went pretty well, but I still couldn't understand what was it all for. Haven't experienced anything like this in my whole life. During all that time I was going to church every week. Also I was telling a lot of stuff to my mother. She was a great help, otherwise I would probably lose my mind. One day she sent me a message to bring out some tissues. This was 11 AM, December 5th. She was at the church about 3 hours ago, so she had an idea how I could react. I went there. A man walks out to tell his testimony. I started to listen, and then this happens. I was crying literally for another hour.
I słuchajcie, w 2011 roku, to było po 30 latach tego bagna, Pan Bóg dopuścił działanie złego ducha w moim życiu. To spadło na mnie tak z dnia na dzień i zaczęło się dziać we wszystkich przestrzeniach egzystencji, czyli po pierwsze we wnętrzu moim. Nagle z dnia na dzień ja się obudziłem i się zaczęło dziać coś takiego, że ja straciłem sens jakikolwiek życia. To był stan totalnej pustki, kompletnej pustki, jednocześnie brak sensu życia i potężny lęk. Lęk przed śmiercią, lęk przed tym, co będzie. Druga rzecz, relacje. Ja jestem żonaty, wówczas miałem córkę i ta nasza rodzina jakoś funkcjonowała i wydawało mi się w tej iluzji, że to jest takie fajne, że my się kochamy, że jest dobrze. Więc te nasze relacje się rozsypały kompletnie. Myśmy zaczęli żyć jak dwaj wrogowie pod jednym dachem, a najbardziej na tym cierpiało nasze dziecko. Trzecia rzecz to zdrowie. Otóż jakieś takie dziwne dolegliwości, potężne bóle kręgosłupa, to takie było najgorsze, ja nie mogłem chodzić. Bywały dni, że ja w tym wszystkim leżałem jeszcze i nie mogłem się ruszyć, ale też bóle narządów wewnętrznych. Zaczęły się dziać takie rzeczy nadprzyrodzone. To znaczy początkowo to były jakieś szmery, jakieś głosy, A później to się zaczęło już tak dziać jak w horrorach. Ja w nocy byłem duszony, jakieś cienie się przemykały i to też się cały czas nasilało. No, też była taka z mojej własnej strony podejrzenie, że ja postradałem od tego wszystkiego zmysłu, ale jednocześnie wiedziałem, że to, co się dzieje, jest nienormalne, się dzieje. Gdybym miał wrócić na jeden dzień do takiego stanu, choćby tylko wewnętrznego, to ja wolę rok naprawdę kilof i do kamieniołomu.
He talks about how he had this amazing life, you could say, from the outside. And one day after 30 years, it all was falling apart exactly for 3 months. Apparently he was suicidal, but he made a call to one of his friends who told him about similar experience and how he restored his faith thanks to Jesus and the Virgin Mary.
Ja jestem z Zielonej Góry, to jest takie miasto, tam 140 000 mieszkańców. Krzychu zaczął mi opowiadać o Jezusie Chrystusie. On mi powiedział, że się 2 lata wcześniej nawrócił. Jego ojciec umarł i on po prostu zaczął sobie zadawać pytania. Po co my żyjemy, co się dzieje po, jak to jest. I to go zaprowadziło do spowiedzi. I on mi zaczął to mówić. I powiedział tak: Andrzej, to co ty opowiadasz, to się wszystko dzieje. Ta rzeczywistość istnieje, ona jest dla nas zakryta. Kiedy mówiłem o tym żonie, to mówiłem, że to jest najmądrzejszy człowiek na świecie. Że ja nie wiem, jak on to mówił, że on mówił wszystko to, co ja chciałem usłyszeć. Ja mu zadawałem dziwne pytania, karkołomne, a on na to wszystko odpowiadał w taki sposób, no to było jak melodia. Wieczorem byłem u spowiedzi. Padłem na kolana i 30 lat wyznałem. Kochani, wyszedłem stamtąd, jakby ktoś ciężarówkę gruzu ze mnie zrzucił. Ja wyszedłem jak nowy człowiek.
They were giving away these books. I picked one up and again started crying as I was walking out of church. Imagine how it looked like among all these people. The guy took like 15 minutes to talk with me, gave me his contact info, told me to go again for a confession and said I can call him whenever, but he had to go. This sounds like some made up story, but he just explained it so well. He's doing it for 10 years. Apparently, often enough, if you're telling or looking for the truth, everything will stand on your way.
Patrzcie, ilu waszych znajomych w rodzinach, może rodziców, nie wiem, może rodzeństwa, może bliskich, idzie na zatracenie wieczne. Idzie do czeluści, z której nie ma wyjścia. Czy jakby ktoś szedł, nie wiem, nawet twój wróg, menel z osiedla i studzienka by była otwarta, kanalizacyjna i on idzie i tam chce wpaść zaraz, to nie pobiegłbyś i nie krzyczał: stój człowieku, zaraz się zabijesz. Ja wiem, że jest trudno mówić o Jezusie Chrystusie ludziom, którzy są z dala, ale to jest poniekąd, kochani, nasz obowiązek. Sami tego nie zrobimy, ale możemy tego dokonać z Matką Bożą. To, co tu jest napisane, ja wierzę, że każdy z was się z tym zapozna. To, co tu jest napisane, to ja już robiłem cały czas. Tylko tu jest, jak to robić doskonale. Tu jest po prostu instrukcja obsługi, jak zawierzyć całkowicie swoje życie, oddać Matce Bożej. Tu jest to słynne takie powiedzenie, zawołanie świętego Ludwika: totus tuus ego sum, omnia mea tua sum, czyli cały jestem Twój, Maryjo, i wszystko to, co moje, do Ciebie należy. To jest taka esencja. To nie jest książeczka dla papieża czy dla teologa. Bo to Ludwik dowodzi, że gdyby chciał pisać dla ludzi uczonych, to by pisał innymi słowami. Ja świadczę o tym, co widziałem. I powiem wam, bądźmy tymi apostołami czasów ostatecznych. Bo tak naprawdę każdy z nas dziś to czuje, że czas jest bliski, że ta powszechna apostazja, która dotknęła Europę Zachodnią, widzimy jej żniwo, co się dzieje. My jesteśmy w tym szczęśliwym miejscu, a to tylko i wyłącznie za sprawą tego, że tu królową Polski jest Maryja.
The guy is from Zielona Góra, a small town almost crossing the border with Germany. He had some incredible stories. They are driving around the country now and giving away these books. Apparently it changed the life of a lot of people. In December, I've started seeing more of these numbers again in orders, even though I was in a different place, but that wouldn't even surprise me anymore. Different things were keep happening until Christmas. We had quite a lot of sales, but still my expectations were a lot bigger. At the same time, if the sales would have gone up straight away, maybe we wouldn't keep up, so I always explained that we were not ready yet, especially considering the offers were still not that good and could be missing some important information. Something was keep messing with me as well if I did the right choice moving there, if I'd be able to keep up. Again, no one will believe me, but I've had a view at analytics every day, even though we've had same offers for same products. Sometimes sales would have randomly stopped if there was no items of stock, or randomly go up. Something watched over me all the time, and I learned a lot thanks to that. If you are still right here listening to this, I just wanted to say thank you. I'm very grateful. I still not sure what was it for exactly, but I learned a lot, especially about the fact that you should never lose faith. Be always grateful and kind to your family, and as long as you keep telling the truth, you are always winning. I know I notice small things and sometimes make a big deal out of this, but I went back home and the light outside the window was going exactly on the portrait I had. So again, I have taken some photos. The snow has fallen down as well a few days ago. It really felt like Christmas. There were the times when we only used to have rain. I felt like it's finally all over. I just didn't know how to explain that to my family. I was about to do it at the dinner table, but not many people wanted to listen. At some point, someone even mentioned that I would ruin everything. I shared the wafer with some people, even though they mentioned to not do it because of the restrictions. I found it weird. Eventually, we decided to go to a nearby family with my cousin, which turned out to be great as well. I asked them if they want to go for midnight mass. I've never been on it, but no one was really interested, so I went alone. It was pretty windy and cold, but eventually I went in and it was cool to experience it for the first time. On the second day of Christmas, I had this strong feeling when I wake up to go and check up for one of the girls I had a crush on in middle school. Just wanted to wish her Merry Christmas. I haven't seen her for years. She lived a few houses down the street. I just went there, stood by the fence, but there was no one around. I'm looking across the street. There's an older guy opening the gate. He asked me who I was. Then he told me she moved away from the hometown literally 2 months ago, around the same time as my sister and exactly a month before me. We started talking. He knew everyone around, had some mixed feelings about my father, also has told me a lot about my grandfather. He was a good cook and a good man until the time he got along with people around here. Then he started drinking a lot. Also, apparently, it all got started at his work. He literally said everyone around here has either moved out or died. There was a lot of thieves, some people went to jail or are living by themselves now. I was in disbelief. All this time I was asking everyone about my family. How was my dead grandfather and uncle, and these last 3 months finally led me here. On the second day of Christmas, this guy just gave me a summary and I could ask him whatever, because he knew everyone around. He said that back in the day they wouldn't have used any phones, so he doesn't even have it now, and I won't be able to call him. But he also said that we can talk another time. Later on I discovered that my uncle knows this man and they talk a lot. I've been told by someone else that it is not worth talking with him, because he says a lot of stuff to different people apparently. But I also remember that my family was never talking about their problems among each other, and this wouldn't lead to anything better. Finally, I went back to my apartment. We have received a negative review for no apparent reason. I didn't have time to mention it, but believe it or not, again, every time we got one, the address of the client was right beside the border of Poland. I looked up the address and it turned out again to be on the way to Zielona Góra. Yes, I called up the client a few days later. He says the issue has been resolved and he even insisted to delete the comment, but something has told me I gotta pack up and head there anyway. Also, I was looking for these doctors. They had an amazing story how they overcame their problems. So this was the only time I could maybe have a chance to meet them up in private. I really wanted to share my story. Last time I heard they were in Międzygórze, so I headed that way for New Year's Eve.
You just disappeared completely.
I had a calling.
We dated for 6 years, and the closest you ever came to a religious experience was Celtic winning the cup.
Look, yes, I was scared about the wedding. So I had a few pints too many, maybe. I raised my eyes and I asked, am I doing the right thing? And that's the last thing I remember. And when I woke up, I was lying on my back in the street, and I don't know how I got there. And there was this man standing over me, Ruth. And he reached out his hand and he said to me, "Can I help you, brother?" And the first thing I noticed was the rope tied around his waist, and I looked at him and I knew I was supposed to go with him. I was supposed to leave everything that mattered behind.